4 of the best London gunmakers of all time on the table, and somewhat of an expert, Simon Reinhold, to take us through them. We're going to take all of the stocks and actions out and have a compare, and you're going to hopefully...
Yeah, we'll walk you through them. We've got here 4 of the best quintessential London gunmakers, based around Mayfair in London, making the best quality guns probably of all time. This is the zenith of English gun making.
That are still around.
Yes, they are. Some are. The top one is the odd one out, as Woodward are no longer still around, but we are looking at James Purdy and Sons, Boss & Co, Holland & Holland, and James Woodward & Sons. Now, we've got Audley Street, Mount Street, Bruton Street, and just around the corner St James's. So it's all in that square mile, and they are producing phenomenally beautiful shotguns with phenomenal actions, brilliant design that just encapsulates the best, fastest handling game shooting shotguns that were made. They were made for top quality clientele for whom money was no object.
Do they all price up similarly, or did they all price up similarly versus today? Do they price up similarly?
Yes and no. It's always been said that Boss & Co styled themselves as makers of best guns only, and because of that they were viewed, even by the King at the turn of the century, as too expensive. He famously said, Boss & Co, lovely guns, far too expensive. So they are all of a rough price bracket. How that translates today is difficult to tell, but yeah, so you can see each has a slightly different individual style. The engraving styles, these are the house styles that are classic to these London gun makers. So Purdy's tight rose and scroll work. You have Boss's more open rose and scroll work with 5 cartouches of little buds of roses surrounded by their tight scroll work. There's only 3 on a Purdy. Holland's more of an Art Deco style, acanthus leaf, with the cartouche with the name in.
And was that just to be different with the
Yeah, it was. It was to stand out in a crowded marketplace. They're all chasing the same money. They're all chasing the game shooting, landowning money. So, and they have different styles. Woodward again is again the odd one out there. There's a slightly protruding tumbler on a Woodward, peculiar to their design. The safety catch stands out on a Woodward always, with that little T at the top that covers the safe. That is a classic sign of Woodward. I'll just take it off with the top lever. The hand attachable lock from Holland's, that's a classic Holland style. This design, it's difficult to choose between any of these as
so
the best.
Any of the actual, the engineering designs mechanically superior?
Again, there are subtle differences. There's a self-opening system for Purdy's, which forces the barrels down, and the trips the ejectors, and the cartridges fly out. The other 2 are easy opening, and they assisted easy opening. They have different names for different styles, and the force comes from the ejector work inside the fore end, or just under the barrels, in fact, that sits in the fore end. Whereas the force for the self-opening mechanism comes from Beasley's patent, which Purdy's bought from Frederick Beasley. So it's difficult to separate any of these. They are all very, very good in their own way.
Okay. So there's a bit of personal preference perhaps between them?
If you want me to pick one,
obviously,
it'd be Woodward. The one that doesn't exist now, the one that was bought by James Purdy and Sons.
Is that just to be contrarian?
No, it's not. I love these arcaded fences on a Woodward. I think they are absolutely stunning.
Aren't they? Yeah.
They're absolutely stunning. They just add something extra that the others don't have.
I've noticed every gun that you like always has a very strong fence.
Yes. Yes, it's just another part of the canvas on the metalwork, if I can put it that way, that the engraver and the action finishers can get to work on. And that level of detail is unnecessary. As you can see, it's not necessary to anything other than the fact that it's a beautiful aesthetic to the gun.
And I must admit I've always been a bit of a Woodward fan.
Yeah, me too.
It would be a Woodward over and under over most things, and if it was new, it would be a Boss over and under. Okay, but that's a personal one. Right?
For me, it would be a side-by-side, side-lock Woodward, not necessarily with the protruding tumblers, but in 16 bore.
One day I'll grow up and like side-by-sides probably. I'm not quite there yet. So if you had to go for a new one, do they still look and feel the same as these do they still run with the same styles, or have they changed fundamentally over the years?
Essentially, they still run with the same styles.
And when did these styles come in that they're currently using?
They were developed in the late 1880s, 1890s, really, is when these styles were adopted. Single triggers, each of these houses offered a single trigger option. They differ mechanically. Boss's is famously intricate, as you probably know.
Yes.
And restocking a boss is famously difficult because the stock has to be cut exactly for the tumblers to work inside the single trigger and the pivots to work properly. It's the fact is, the ones that are being made now, they have to be different because shooting has changed. Shooting has morphed from medium height, classically driven partridges shot with ounce load number 7s to people wanting to fire larger loads, which these guns now have
largely
to
the same birds.
Largely the same birds, but that is shooting has always evolved. Shooting has always developed, and gun making has developed because of it. So there are differences when you handle modern era made guns to.
They've been mildly magnumised, maybe.
That's one way of putting it. Yeah, that's one way of putting it. They have to be stronger to cope with larger loads that customers want to shoot.
And I think they're also perhaps competing with the market of big, strong, heavy guns that will take the abuse.
Exactly. If you want to shoot a 36 gram load, then you're probably going to be in the market for an over and under. But I mean, if you want something that's going to handle classically, elegantly,
and look
beautifully,
good,
and just look stunning, then you can't really go wrong with one of these.
So when buying second hand, which one do people value less? Which is the best value for money out of the three at an auction?
It's entirely dependent on condition. It's mostly dependent on the condition of the barrels. If the barrels are original and they are thick, which is really above 22 thousandths of an inch thick, and bear in mind that a Coke can, if you cut open a Coke can and have it as a thin piece of metal, it's probably about 6 to 7 thou thick. So you're only talking, 20 thou.
2 Coke cans.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not a lot of metal. It is only a guide for the lead and the gases to expand up through, and it will always take its easiest path.
What is the thinnest barrel you've ever shot?
I wouldn't be tempted to shoot below 18, depending on the cartridge that I was using. To be honest with you, if it's a light 2-inch load, then 18 is fine. I have measured guns down to 12, but no one recommends shooting a 12 thou barrel. So that is a
were guns ever made that thin, or is that just
some game guns? Some clients walked in and said, "I want light handling, fast handling, light barrels." So the barrels were struck to measure 20 thou from new. That has been in the past where people have wanted them to be, but obviously it shortens the lifespan.
Yeah.
So, but that customer would have in mind that he would have, if he was shooting, and bear in mind some of these people were shooting 5 days, 6 days a week, and large volumes of cartridges, he'd be putting new barrels in 4 or 5 years' time, and he would have factored that into the price. So, because he wanted that specific handling. Okay. So
going back, they all represent relatively good value for when there's not one that is worth more than the other second hand.
No, again, not really, and it does vary between originality of condition. If it's got a lot of original colour on the action, if it's got original barrels with good quality, true to original proof mark bore sizes, so it hasn't been shot a lot, and nice thick barrel walls, that is going to be worth more than one that is on the ragged edge of 18 and under. Which you're probably going to have to factor in either sleeving it or rebarreling it. Rebarreling it being more expensive. Right. So
how much is rebarreling now?
It depends. It depends. You can get prices. You can get good quality rebarrel jobs, and you can get bad quality rebarrel. And the same with sleeving. You can get excellent sleeving work,
some very vile sleeving
and some real barrels by quick fit sleeving work. Yeah. So it's no
all of which will go bang, obviously.
Exactly, they will, but the handling will be gone. It will feel lumpy in the hands. Whereas the point of one of these side look ejectors is for the even distribution of weight over the whole gun, so that it feels effortless to use. Essentially, these represent the cream of the crop of London gun making, and their history goes back to the 1800s for the most part. Some are a little bit later. Woodward is a later addition, but Henry
clearly did well enough because someone bought him out.
Yeah, exactly. In the 40s, Purdy's bought him. So, but the history goes back. Their marketing at the turn of the century to dominate the market effectively was that good that they became the most.
You've all seen adverts back then. Did gun makers tell lies back then about their quality, or is that like a?
I think I might be putting it a little strongly. I think it was. I don't think they went as far as criticising others. I think they tried to extol the virtues of their own designs.
Well, they're clearly good because they haven't changed the action.
No, they haven't. In this long, they were perfected. You can see from the Holland design, when other gun makers later on in the sort of 50s, 60s and 70s went looking for a design to copy, AYA in Spain, Aguirre Ranthebal, decided to look at the Holland action and copy it and try and produce one for a fraction of the cost.
And it used
and they're
to
extremely
be a
popular.
fraction of the cost.
It used to be a fraction of the cost, and they're extremely popular because they don't have the same handling qualities, but they are roughly
the same finish qualities.
No, and not quite the same finish, not quite the same materials. You can see the quality of the woodwork is not there, but it is the similar design with the similar handling properties of a true London or a London sidelock design, but for a fraction of the price.
This is. I was about to say it's the 88 to the Beretta of today, but they're nowhere near the same inside, so it doesn't really count.
But I'm going to take that off the table because
it doesn't deserve to be there.
Really deserve to be there with these guys.
So, is London the thing? Would you, if it was your money, be buying London, or
I mean
there
are
the
other
same quality mechanically, provincially?
I am a big fan of provincial gun makers. I have a pair of Rossens in this gun room that are, to me, utterly outstanding. Just they
are very pretty.
Elegance of their understated beauty is just, it dropped me as soon as I opened the case lid. So a big fan of Ross, and I also admire of Stephen Grant. His side lever I thought was absolutely, again it would have to be in 16 bore for me because that's me, but a side lever 16 bore Grant would be a dream gun to have. And he was based in London. You have you've got other gun makers making fantastic things. Pape made astonishingly good hammer guns, particularly. Pape's had a distinctive style of hammer guns based up in Newcastle. Then you go further north to another of my favourites. You get John Dixon and Son in Scotland.
Still around today.
Trigger blade round actions, round body trigger blade action guns. The handling is like nothing else. They look like box locks, but they handle like side locks. Because the trigger plate
inside as well,
again, really I mean they are beautifully crafted. So it doesn't have to be London, but London is where everybody focuses.
What happened to everybody else in London?
The war took its toll, and both wars took their toll on London gun trade, because obviously there were a great many of the artisans who built these things were killed in the trenches in the First World War, and then a great many of the artisans and their factories were bombed out during the Second. So all in all, the war, and a lot of the economic repercussions of the war as well, everybody was basically skinned. Landowners were trying to keep their houses up and running. There were so many of these great estates that were sold after the war. Death duties were at an all-time high. The market for buying guns like this dropped because the money wasn't there in society to do that kind of game shooting, to buy these guns in the same volume that they were made before those wars. So that's principally what affected the market and really drastically curtailed the activity of not just the London gun trade, but the gun trade throughout the UK. Another of the interesting things about this gun in particular, this is the Boss sidelock with its house engraving style, is we have paperwork for the engraving. This is the original commission from the owner of Boss, John Robertson, to Jack Sumner, his mainstay engraver, dated 6th of August 1904, for complete engraving of this entire gun. And from the records of Boss, we can see when the gun was delivered to the customer. And bear in mind, it was commissioned on the 6th of August, it was delivered to the customer on the 18th of August in 1904, which means that a maximum 12-day turnaround time for engraving the entire gun, which quite frankly is astonishing.
Engraving, hardening, finishing.
Exactly.
Got a load of stock work on there as well.
Yes. I mean, that is just the sheer level of skill that Jack Sumner possessed in his hands to engrave that in such a short space of time. You cannot recreate that kind of quality in such a short space of time by hand these days. It takes longer. But they were making vast quantities of guns for the English aristocracy and landowners to shoot pheasants and partridges.
And I expect they expected it that quickly.
And they did expect it, yeah.
I mean, nowadays one presumes that the lead time for one of these things will be in the sort of year bracket.
Yes, multiple
maybe
years.
More, yes,
multiple years.
I think
18 months.
Didn't Boss have like a 6-year wait time or something?
Yeah,
like that?
and then there's a waiting list to get on as well for places as well. So yeah, it's that kind of little fact that emerges from the records. Just is one of the reasons that it's so much fun.
But they were bigger companies back then.
They were,
I presume.
Yeah. But Sumner was a one-man band. It was. He was.
You'd want to look after
in demand,
him, wouldn't you?
Yeah, you would.
Of course, he's in demand. Anyone could do that.
He was
in 12
demand.
days.
Exactly.
Well, that is unbelievable. So to sum up, none of them is particularly much better than the other. I presume they all have slight mechanical pluses and slight mechanical negatives, and slight finishing pluses and slight finishing negatives. From year to year as well.
They do, but you really have to be picky to start criticising one against the other, because these are superb. I mean, this is functional art, is the way I like to look at it. I mean, they are superb tools for what they were designed to do, made by highly skilled craftsmen, engraved by artisans. They are joyous things to handle and use, and they're still usable. That's the astonishing thing. They're 100 years old, or 120 years old.
And what could you expect to pay for a 100-year-old one of these?
They vary. I mean, they will vary.
What can one access the market at?
You can get in at £3,500 to £4,000. Will get you a sidelock English gun, depending on the state of the barrels, as we discussed. Which, I mean, compared to.
And if you're not fussed on ejectors and hammers, there was a Purdy there for £2,000.
Exactly. Plus, obviously, a commission rate from the auction.
You're probably going to bid against someone, because a lot of people are going to want something.
Exactly. So you have to take the estimate as a guide. They're usually pretty accurate, but do bear in mind that there is a 25% commission plus VAT on that as well. So factor that in. But still, they represent astonishing value for money.
They really do. Right, thank you very much for your lowdown.
My pleasure.
Like I said, there isn't a clear winner. It's just which one you like the most. Which is still, there's no particularly clear winner, because they're all gorgeous.
I'll take that one, though.
I'll take these ones. Right, thank you very much.
My pleasure.